The narrative that Iran is only a year or two away from nuclear weapons goes at least back to 1984. We have Western, New York Times articles going back to 1984, like warning of the threat. You can find people fantasizing about it even in the 70s, even before the revolution, right? It's it's grotesque, and it's of course exactly the same narrative that we've seen in Iraq, 2003, weapons of mass destruction, and those were an utter blatant lie, and it came out as an utter blatant lie. And Colin Powell apologized for lying to the United Nations. Preventive attacks are clearly and utterly outlawed. They are not part of the preemptive strike doctrine. And what Netanyahu did on Friday the 13th is clearly a preventive attack. I mean, even in his speech, he said Iran is 1 or 2 years away from a nuclear bomb. It's like that does not count as even under the doctrine of just war as a case of a preemptive strike. If anything at all, it's preventive, and that's ruled out, outlawed. You cannot do it. It is an attack, and in this case, under the UN Charter, it is Iran that has the right to self-defense.
Welcome, everyone. Today, we're joined by a fantastic guest and a truly great friend of mine, Dr. Pascal Lottaz. Pascal is Assistant Professor of International Relations at Kyoto University in Japan, and he is host of the best podcast on geopolitics, Neutrality Studies on YouTube. It's been one of my go-to YouTube channels for several years now. If you haven't already, please go ahead and check out his wonderful, wonderful channel. I'll leave the link in the description below. Pascal, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me, Lena.
Well, I think the events that we're, experiencing right now, that they're happening right now, are truly, truly concerning. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on several key aspects that will help us understand what's going on and sort of really put things in perspective. So I want to start off with the event that took place on June the 13th, the day when Israel attacked Iran. Israel stated that the strikes were, quote, preemptive. And so this particular term, preemptive strikes, it does have a very clear definition in international law and, as you mentioned in one of your recent videos, the just war theory. So are there any grounds to believe that Israel's attack on Iran was indeed preemptive on June the 13th?
The first thing I need to explain is that, the term preemptive, although it does exist as a concept in international law and is especially one of just war theory, which is a very old, actually, Christian doctrine on when it is okay to go to war. There is no preemptive right to preemptive strikes under the UN Charter. That doesn't exist. The UN Charter only recognizes the right to self-defense and collective self-defense under Article 51. It doesn't recognize a right of preemptive strikes. It doesn't. Now, also all of the big international conventions we have, they do not recognize preemptive strikes as a concept. What we do have is legal scholars who argue that the right to self-defense can, under certain circumstances, include the right to preemptive defense, which is also like a kind of a joke, because it's all a preemptive strike is always an offensive strike. But there are legal scholars, and there are in that sense, you do have certain expert opinions which actually do make up part of the compendium of international law, what is counted as the law. But the word preemptive is different from preventive, and preemptive is even closer to a strike on your territory being about to be executed. So it's this idea that if the adversary already amasses troops at your border and has said publicly that they will attack tomorrow, and has given all of the indications that it's not just a threat, but that it will be executed, and has already done the preparations, then it would be unreasonable for you to have to wait until they strike. So you would be allowed under this doctrine of preemptive defense to actually start striking at these amassed troops at the border, or whatever it is that is really imminent, imminent as in just a couple of hours away from happening, without the slightest chance of doubt. Preventive attacks, on the other hand, are attacks that are supposed to knock out an adversary who might attack you at some point in the future. And preventive attacks are clearly and utterly outlawed. They are not part of the preemptive strike doctrine. And what Netanyahu did on Friday the 13th is clearly a preventive attack. I mean, even in his speech, he said Iran is 1 or 2 years away from a nuclear bomb. It's like that does not count as even under the doctrine of just war as a case of a preemptive strike. If anything at all, it's preventive. And that's ruled out, outlawed. You cannot do it. It is an attack. And in this case, under the UN Charter, it is Iran that has the right to self-defense. So anything that Israel is doing at the moment in terms of, oh, the Iranians are striking at us, we have to defend ourselves, Israel has the right to defend itself. You do not have the right to defend yourself if you're the one who starts it, if you're the one who keeps firing, especially if the other side keeps saying, which the Iranians do, stop this and we will stop ours. So this entire narrative that Israel has built up it holds no water. And if people argue that it does, and that there is some weird international law doctrine that would allow this, they are making it up. They're pulling it out of their behinds, seriously. And that's what's extremely frustrating at the moment, especially since in the first 1 or 2 days, it wasn't quite clear if the Europeans would back this argument. They just said like, oh, we call on both sides to de-escalate, which is also kind of a joke, but fine. And now after the G7 summit, they've now come out with statements saying like, no, we support and we reiterate Israel's right to defend itself. And this to me is like it's just kind of the West again trying to make up a new rule in this rules-based international order. And the new rule is Israel's right to self-defense includes all and anything Israel wants to strike for all and any reason that it gives to us. So if Israel makes up any kind of claim, then that claim is immediately backed by its right to self-defense, even if that includes genocide in Gaza, even if that includes an offensive attack against Iran. So it's the newest rule of the rules-based international order.
Exactly. And I think, as you pointed out, it seems that we are redefining or completely ignoring willfully the international law and also any moral standards. Because if we allow one party, one actor to do as it pleases, and we enable that, then, well, I guess we're then moving towards living in the, what is it, the rule of the jungle, or basically lawless society where there's no accountability and there's no framework that sort of leads the state and people within that state to act a certain way that would then enable a nation to function and enable that legal framework to exist moving forward, both domestically and also internationally. And I think on the domestic scale, we seem to, freedom of speech. We saw what happened with the protests when people try to voice peacefully their opposition to any policies, then they're being persecuted. And on the international scale, we just saw the G7 effectively come out and say we support Israel's right to self-defense, but at the same time we do not believe that Iran has the same right to self-defense. And that's kind of moving towards this chaos, total chaos, both internationally and domestically.
It is. And it's, of course, also the hollowing out of the meanings of words, right? It's the hollowing out of the meanings of norms. I mean, this is, again, it's Orwellian. If you call an aggressive attack against the infrastructure of another state, an unprovoked attack against the infrastructure of another state, and again, not just unprovoked, I mean, it is not even immediate, right? There was no immediate threat to Israel emanating from Iran. There wasn't. Right. And then calling this self-defense, of course, hollows out the entire concept of self-defense. But that's what we've been doing constantly, and this hollowing out will bite us back will bite us again. And just to one more thing is that this is actually not even new. This is not the first time Israel does this. Israel has been under this doctrine of self-defense. It has bombed and attacked and invaded Lebanon. It has bombed systematically Syria for the last 10 years, the entire time. It occupies the Golan Heights under this doctrine. I mean, this is actually just the continuation of a long-standing Israeli policy and speech act, right, of redefining aggressive expansionism in its neighborhood as self-defense, and more countries subscribing to that makes it very dangerous, because then it actually becomes a norm of international relations, and we don't want that norm back, right? The West's doublespeak is so bothersome to people like you and I, to the thinking part of the population on the planet, because on the one hand, they keep making these two sets of rules, right? The Israel has any right to attack anyone if it feels threatened, but if Russia says, like, we felt threatened by Ukraine, then that is the greatest danger to humanity, right? And we need to stop that one, but not this one. And that's this inconsistency that we don't want to see, right? And you and I, we keep saying, like, okay, the moment Russian soldiers stepped over Ukrainian borders, that was an infringement of international law, even if there was a reason for that, even if it was provoked. But we try to stay consistent to saying, like, no, we need to recognize these breaches of the norm wherever they happen, and then we try to explain them, put them in context, and actually make sense out of them. But the fact that in the West we are constantly being given these Orwellian narratives that frame always one party as an innocent lamb and an angel that just needs to defend itself, and the other one as pure evil. I mean, this is what's so offending as people who try to look at the world and understand what's happening, because obviously it's not black and white, but in certain moments, really, like this urge for the West to just back whichever side it is that they think serves their international politics, their global schemes and their domination schemes the best, and then also frame it in moral terms. That's so outraging. Instead of recognizing, look, I mean, if any other country on this planet did what Israel does, we would call it an apartheid state that's trying to commit a genocide and that is aggressively expansionist in its region. We just don't do it with this one, and it has to do, of course, with history, and that this is, I mean, in my view, just the latest and the last real colonial project of the West, of white European settlers dominating a indigenous population and doing to them what Europe has been doing, to three continents. This type and form of genocide is something that out of the 19th century, which we Europeans did regularly the whole time, and we even felt entitled to do so, right? Especially in Africa and North America. The reason why they are why people look like you and I do and not like the native Indians who used to live there 500 years ago is because of genocide, right? And that's what the Europeans did. They emptied out at least 2.5 continents, right? Depending on, I mean, South America was a little bit better I mean, the South Americans were a little bit luckier in the terms of resistance. They still have more indigenous population, but Australia and North America, they were wiped out, right? And now this doesn't mean that, I mean, today's people living there, I mean, it's part of the history that we have to deal with. But when we see some of these crimes unfolding again, then people with a moral compass, I think, should try to properly name what's going on. And we clearly see how our governments in Europe and North America don't want to do that. and other people see that, in Asia, people see that. In Africa, people see that. And they speak about that. And then Europe and North America goes like, no, you are not understanding this correctly. Let me teach you. It's like, well, we just can't get out of our goddamn skin. So I stop here.
Right. I mean, there's a lot that can be said. And I think you brought up very important historic precedents that help us understand and put things in perspective and really understand that this is not the first time that this is happening. And actually, now is the time when we can try to make a difference, when we can have these uncomfortable conversations, because the West is dominated by the narrative that Iran is bad and everybody who wants to fight Iran is good. And I think we need to look deeper, and now is certainly the time to do so and to have these conversations and to try to understand what's driving these policies, US policy towards Iran, in order, we need to do that in order to prevent a possible, possibly a new war. And so now you mentioned nuclear weapons, right? So at the heart of this is, of course, the failed JCPOA under Trump 1.0, and now, of course, the negotiations that that almost happened, but were effectively sabotaged. And so if we step back a little bit, since 1995, Netanyahu has been stating that Iran is weeks or days away from developing a nuclear weapon. So since 1995, it's been, 30 years, and still it hasn't happened. Recently, Tulsi Gabbard, National Intelligence Director, in a congressional testimony stated that U.S. spy agencies have no evidence, zero evidence of Iran attempting to build a nuclear weapon. No evidence at all. Tulsi Gabbard's testimony followed Iran's supreme leader's public announcement that Iran is not and will not seek to develop a nuclear weapon. So countries with nuclear weapons tend to use about 90% enriched weapons-grade uranium. And according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran has enriched uranium to 60% only. So clearly there is absolutely no evidence to indicate that Iran presents an imminent threat to Israel or to any other country.
It's precisely, it doesn't. It's even worse, it only goes back to 1995 with Netanyahu, because that's around when Netanyahu became big in Israeli politics. The narrative that Iran is only a year or two away from nuclear weapons goes at least back to 1984. We have Western, New York Times articles going back to 1984, like warning of the threat. You can find people fantasizing about it even in the 70s, even before the revolution, right? Mm-hmm. It's grotesque, and it's of course exactly the same narrative that we've seen in Iraq, 2003, weapons of mass destruction, and those were an utter blatant lie, and it came out as an utter blatant lie. And Colin Powell apologized for lying to the United Nations Security Council when he held up that little vial, saying this is the agent that they're using, and it was just nothing. I mean, he just made it up, and we know all of that, and it's being brought out again. It's warmed up again. It's just even more unbelievable this time. But we still need to repeat that this is again a long tradition of lying about the potential the capabilities or potential capabilities of some designated adversary in order to justify war. That's all it is. And anyone who then says but you're not trusting the intelligence. We have intelligence. Right. Yeah, show me that intelligence. And again, that's why it's so important that Tulsi Gabbard came out, because she's the chief. She's the head of the intelligence services in the United States. So she actually did a very politically savvy thing, which is she sabotaged that argument 2 months ago. And I thank her very much for that. It's still not enough to take away the argument, because now people just don't go to this the intelligence argument, but what they do is they try to establish narrative control, right? That's what the US has learned. That's what also Europe knows. What you need is you need to command the thinking space of not the entire population, but 80%. You need, as long as 80% are with you online, the nation will march in one direction. If you lose the narrative control, what happens is what happened to the US in the 70s when they lost the control over how the Vietnam War was being was being portrayed, right? Then you suddenly have protests in the street, mass protests, and you will have some congressmen feeling pressure to actually do hearings and do something, and then that's when it gets out of control for the warmongers in chief who want the nation to run in one direction. So right now there's the attempt, especially also by the media, is still to establish this narrative control in order to create facts. One thing to understand is once you have the bombings taking place, once soldiers are being deployed, the war machine is going, right? If you can get to that point, then whatever comes next will certainly entail more military involvement and affairs until something compels you to somehow take it back. But the fact will have been created, and that's currently the goal of getting over the. I mean, from the viewpoint of the war hawks in Washington and in Tel Aviv, is to get over the inertia in order to start the war, and then things will spiral very naturally into very, very nasty things. And one of the issues to understand is that sometimes people think, oh, but what's the strategy? I mean, if we go into Iran and then it ends like Afghanistan, or it ends like Iraq or Libya, and the country is completely destroyed and hundreds of thousands of millions of people die. I mean, that's not a strategy, right? That's a disaster. That's a disaster. The thing to understand is that there's people in the US and in Tel Aviv who want exactly that. That's the goal. The disaster is the goal. The whole humanitarian. We are acting in a humanitarian way. We just want to get rid of the mullah regime. We want to help the Iranians to empower themselves. All of that is utter BS. I mean, Mr. Netanyahu, understands precisely and has implemented in its surroundings, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Iraq, and so on. What has been implemented over not just the last 20 years, but the last 50 years, is a strategy of scorched earth. If everything else burns, and the others are at war with each other because you foster factionalism and terrorism, and then they bomb each other, well, then Israel can thrive, right? It's like you thrive in the chaos of the others. And this is not to say that this is some term of evil plan. This is just what emerged naturally and what worked. And doing this now on a massive total scale in Iran, that's the goal of some of these people. And they camouflage it behind humanitarianism because people love humanitarianism. People in the United States, in Europe, would like to be good. They would like to help others. And so what you need to do is you need to sell war, death, destruction, and chaos as, a way of delivering humanitarianism. And that's what's so perverse about this approach. And some of the people in Washington and Tel Aviv actually understand what they're doing, and others are just it's always believed that they're doing this for humanitarian causes, right? This is a humanitarian bombing, humanitarian intervention. They believe this BS. And maybe we need to differentiate between these two groups, but that's only for moral questions. In effect, both of these groups will implement the same kind of policy, which will have horrible effects. And if anyone says like, oh, but it's better that Saddam was toppled, in Iraq. It's better we live in a world without Saddam than with Saddam. Then I just ask you, well, go and ask the Iraqis. Because it has been 20 years. They still don't have self-control back. They don't even have control over their oil. The US takes out the oil, puts the money into a New York bank account, and Iraq needs to apply to the use of the money from its oil in the New York bank account. And it's up to the discretion of the United States to say yes or no. There's in large parts of Iraq, you still have daily power outages after 20 years because the US bombed all of the infrastructure, the power grid of Iraq, and is prohibiting Iraq from rebuilding it. Iraq is also fractured into different parts, and the Kurdish part has a bit more self-government, but the country is utterly, completely broken up. And again, this chaos and this low standard of living is part and parcel of the strategy in order to keep potential rivals under the boot. because under Saddam Hussein, Iraq was a more, not a completely unified, but more or less it was a functioning state with especially a functioning military, and that's the one thing that Israel really fears, of Arabs actually getting together and having also military means. I see also how, from the Israeli perspective, this does look like a threat. The thing is just telling everybody else that because you feel insecure because others have a functioning state, that is not under international law a legitimate means, a legitimate reason to break up their countries and saw death and destruction. And that's what's going on. And right now, what they're trying to do is a mega Iraq in Iran, and that's the narrative. But I do think this might backfire big time, and it's already backfiring, like literally big time.
Exactly. And I do want to discuss regime change in just a couple of minutes. But first, I think we need to also point out that Iran was at the negotiating table with the United
Yes.
States, because we
Yes.
hear now, we see these posts by President Donald Trump right now saying, we must bomb it and that will bring them to the negotiating table. Well, they were at the negotiating table, and Iran welcomed diplomacy because likely they understood that, well, first of all, the economic sanctions are devastating. And, when I spoke to Professor Marandi several months ago, he pointed out that economic sanctions that are imposed on Iran affect disproportionately civilians. For example, people with terrible diseases are unable to purchase medicine in many cases
Of
because
course.
of these sanctions. So when people who are listening to this conversation right now, when they think about, well, we need to sanction them to make them do X, Y, Z, we need to understand that those sanctions affect civilians first and foremost, and they affect the most vulnerable groups of people. And so, Iran welcomed diplomacy. Just several weeks ago, it welcomed diplomacy because likely a nuclear deal could lead Iran to be integrated into a new Middle East. China just brokered peace between Iran and Saudi Arabia several years ago. So it was a good way to sort of move into a more stable and peaceful environment, hopefully. At least it was sort of like it appeared to be a path towards some stability. And that would have allowed the United States to pull back from the region. But of course, the outcome, this would have been, of course, very, very beneficial for the United States. But it was sabotaged by the strikes on June the 13th. And now we're on the very edge of what could develop into a World War III if it goes the way it appears to be, to be going.
Yes, yes, this is absolutely correct. I mean, that's why it is such a this is such a sly argument and such a deceitful way of like selling war to the general public, right? Because it's not just the negotiating table thing; it's also the nuclear weapons thing. I mean, just imagine the US and Iran keep saying Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. Now, the fact is Iran doesn't have nuclear weapons, and Iran says we are not seeking nuclear weapons. So the US is telling Iran to not do something that they already said we are not doing and we are not intending to do. And then it's like, oh, but you need to agree to this. It's like, yes, I mean, we already agreed. Oh, but you're not agreeing.
Right.
It's like, how do you react to that? I mean, seriously, like how do you deal with this? And then the second one is like, you need to negotiate with us. Well, we are negotiating. We have the next round of talks planned. And at each time we meet, the US president said, oh, we will have a deal. We will have a deal. We're getting closer. We're getting closer.
Right.
And then the other side bombs you out of the blue, and they weren't expecting that because these negotiations were going on, and they had their guard down, and the Israelis were able to, and with U.S. help of the intelligence and so on, and the assets, they were able to have this sneak attack with drones that they smuggled into the country, very dangerous type of warfare, with missile strikes, and of course they took out electronically like the air defense of Iran for at least 8 hours. I mean, that was a huge surprise blow. Very big. And then 24 hours later, the US president comes out and says like, ha, 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 I knew about this all the time. And, this was coordinated. It was a beautiful strike, beautiful strike. I knew
Yeah.
about it all along. And then they say like, oh, but you need to come to the negotiating table. And this side is like, what the hell? You actually admitted that negotiating with us was part of the ruse, of the
Right.
tactic to lull us into believing that we were on a good track. Then you brag about the fact that you did that and that it worked and that we were dumb enough to believe you, and then you still come out and say like we need to negotiate more. I mean, what the hell are you expecting Iran to do? On top of the fact that it was this very president which in the first place exited the JCPOA, which was a functioning legal in treaty, multilateral treaty framework with the Europeans, with Russia, guarantor powers, and Iran was abiding by these standards set out under like everybody said that, including a nuclear watchdog, um, what's the name? The International
Yeah.
Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, and and he exited that.
Mhm.
Iran actually remained and then got criticized for actually breaching. Iran said we will do some of this enrichment again, and then the U.S. actually takes that as an argument, saying like, oh, but you're breaching the agreement. It's like, yeah, the agreement that you yourself exited. The
Right.
position of the United States when it comes to what negotiations are is so incredibly maximalist, not only in the sense of what it demands, but in the way that it demands that the other side ignores all and anything that happened before the date that the new demand is being made. And the US exhibited that again during the latest round of negotiations when Mr. Witkoff went to the Middle East and to meet in Oman, and they had these talks. And Witkoff then said like, okay, what we want is low enrichment. Lower your enrichment, we're fine. And Iran actually said, okay, fine, we will lower the enrichment. Witkoff went back to Trump and then immediately got a talking down, got talked down, saying like, oh, it's not just enrichment. You also have to agree to curb your missile program. And that was, the US immediately moves the goalpost immediately.
Right.
And then that is something that Iran obviously cannot and will not agree to because of the danger emanating from Israel. And they immediately moved the goalpost. And now the goalpost yesterday or 12 hours ago has been moved again because Donald Trump announced that what he now demands is unconditional surrender. On Truth Social, he used the term unconditional surrender. So what you are now demanding is the Japan scenario, right? Japan signed a unconditional surrender in 45 and was then directly occupied for 7 years by the United States. So that's the new goalpost in order to prevent a larger war. And if Iran doesn't sign up for that, then the US says, well, it's up on Iran. I mean, you didn't take the deal. This is not a deal. You're not offering deals. These are surrender terms. It's at this point just utterly it's unbelievable how any nation on earth would agree to something like that before it is utterly militarily beaten. But that's exactly what we would like to avoid. We would like to avoid, uh, you know, Tehran being transformed into another Hiroshima or Nagasaki. And we know that this is now the threat. If Donald Trump, as he did yesterday again, told everybody needs to leave Tehran, this is a direct threat to attack the entire city and, of course, to pull off another, genocidal act of violence, be it through nuclear weapons or through carpet bombing. And this is a 10 million city. You cannot evacuate a 10 million city. It's utterly impossible. Thousands would die, even just the people who would have to somehow be transported out of the hospitals, the elderly, the handicapped, neonatal facilities, and so on. I mean, it's utterly impossible. Yeah, and plus the logistics and the people who would the frail people who would perish on the way, and where would you put all of them? I mean, it's utterly unthinkable. Tokyo was thinking about evacuating at one point in 2011 when the Fukushima nuclear disaster happened.
Hmm.
The government decided against this because they said if we do that, we will for sure kill thousands of people. So it's better to hope that the fallout won't come and we will be safe. And luckily, that was the case. You cannot evacuate cities of this size. So if if the US actually is planning to like carpet bomb Tehran, it will also cost thousands of lives, and there is no way to hide behind saying like, oh, but we told them to evacuate, they didn't. It's not a joke. It's just sick.
Do you think that many states are now going to say, you know what, I think it's probably best to develop a nuclear weapon outside of the Non-Proliferation Treaty, for example, as Israel and North Korea and Pakistan and several other states have, than risk being bombed or risk being, in the shoes of Tehran several years down the road?
Yes and no. Yes, because it definitely makes the case for what you just laid out. And the second one that we had in just the past 3 years is, of course, also Ukraine. And
Yeah.
for all of our criticism that we have against like the what the West and Ukraine what is happening there, one must also realize that Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the war that is going on is also making the case that, if Ukraine had had nuclear weapons, then Russia wouldn't have invaded, right? And that is also a logical conclusion, which I believe a lot of people are making. And this, with Iran, this will be another logical conclusion that people are making. And looking at the fact that North Korea hasn't been attacked is
Yeah.
with nuclear weapons, it proves the North Korean regime right. They were correct in assessing that what they need is nuclear weapons in order to maintain the regime they have and the type of society they have without being attacked by the West. Because otherwise, you're on the chopping block, right? So this is naturally, this argument is now getting stronger. On the other hand, the non-proliferation regime is luckily quite old. It goes back to, I mean, it was negotiated between 68 and 65 and 70. No, sorry, 58 and 68. It came. I mean, the first signatures came in 68, and ever since then we developed a global regime that is in charge of distributing the world's uranium and plutonium. So, because the brilliance of the NPT is that you link signing up to it and saying like, okay, we will not develop nuclear weapons with the right to purchase uranium and plutonium and so on, which not every country has. These are rare, not rare earths, but they're the fuel for this technology that doesn't exist everywhere. And the mining of this is pooled together and is controlled by the IAEA. So one of the mechanisms we have is that it is extremely difficult to get your hands at the material you need without being part of the NPT. Now, it is possible to get it, and Pakistan and India proved that, of course, and Israel also proves that, because we know that they have nuclear weapons and they have an indigenous nuclear weapon program and they know how to do it. We know you can get your hands at these materials, but it is hard, it is difficult. So not every state will have the capacity not only to develop the know-how, but also then to get around these restrictions. That's why I say yes and no, but definitely like militarily and scientifically capable countries, let's say for instance Turkey, they might think about this now, and the ones that are big enough and capable enough, they might think about this. The Saudis might think about it. And for them it might become feasible. Now, again, there are still restrictions, and of course you can work around these restrictions, but it's not going to be easy. So I don't think it's going to be an immediate cause of the NPT to completely collapse, but it might well be another one of the death nails in the coffin of the NPT if we don't turn this around.
Let's talk about the unprecedented mass US deployment of warplanes across the Atlantic. So, how do you see that? Is that the Trump administration effectively flexing its muscles, telling Iran, look what you're up against? Or is the United States truly on track to join Israel in its war on Iran? What do you think?
So this one I just don't know enough. I mean, it looks to me as if though it could be the build up to the blow, right? And the deployment of assets, these military planes to the uh, to the east, or like at least to Europe, and then for deployment from there. I actually, but I don't know enough also what is happening in Diego Garcia. I mean, if there the ships are amassing and so on, if these assets, these also aircraft carriers are being where they're being located, where they are located, but the danger is very high that that's exactly what it is. That this is the buildup, covertly, partially and overtly. I mean, I don't think you can hide this from the Iranians. You can hide this from people with good enough monitoring capacity, but you can certainly try to hide it or camouflage it from us. There is an argument that these airplanes are going to Europe in order to take part in a regular NATO drill exercise, and it's all normal, blah, blah, blah. That's also possible. I don't know. I mean, we are currently under this fog of war where the general public needs to be BS'd and made believe certain things that later on even these governments will deny that that ever took place. We don't know. I would judge the risk, the likelihood that this is the military buildup for full-scale U.S. involvement in the war against Iran is very, very high, especially also the fact, I mean, Donald Trump came home one day early from the G7 meeting in order to deal with the Middle East. He issued this threat to Tehran, which is nothing else but, I mean, a clear threat on making things even worse, whether it is with the U.S. itself or with indigenous Iranian capabilities, because let's not forget they do have nuclear weapons. If the U.S. gives the green light for nuking Tehran, that might be on the cards as well. I mean, there's a lot of potential of very, very dangerous things that could happen. And that the U.S. might agree to. I don't know which one it is, but it is utterly clear to me that right now we are in the preparation stage, at least, for more to come.
And there's something quite odd that just happened as well. And I think you brought it up in one of your videos too. You said you pointed to Ray McGovern's recent post on X. And I kind of want to draw our viewers' attention to this one as well before moving to regime change. So USS Nimitz, that's my understanding, 50 years old. And effectively nearing its time limit of operation. It was just deployed to the Middle East along with other assets. And so former CIA Ray McGovern commented on X. He said, USS Nimitz expect to be attacked as you near Middle East, not by Iran, but by Israel with false flag attack, blaming Iran. And he said, do not cover it up as the U.S. Navy did when Israel attacked the USS Liberty. So for a former CIA operative, this statement is clearly something to take seriously, wouldn't you say?
Yes, but it's a warning. It's like again, it's like Tulsi Gabbard coming out in March saying like we assess that there is no nuclear weapons. I mean, this is another person who's trying uh, to deflate a potential future very important talking point for the war hawks. And what we need to do is we need to talk about this. I mean, the danger of a false flag attack is huge. And Ray McGovern, I mean, he's brilliant, and he's you know he when he retired from the CIA, they created this group of intelligence officials for sanity, not officials, intelligence. Anyhow, this group of people together with a couple of others to say like, look, from what we know and how we did intelligence in the CIA, we can tell you that a lot of this information that you're being fed are lies, including of course the WMDs. I mean, again, war is built on lies, lie after lie, and what he's trying to do is to say like there is one potential future lie. So let's talk about this now, because what you need in the US, again, in order to get these 80%, the critical mass behind you, is you need to be attacked. Because you need to be the good guys, right? And the good guys, they defend. Because the United States, that's very important in its self-understanding, is a reluctant superpower, right? It doesn't want to fight wars. It's a peaceful nation. It longs for peace, democracy, stability. It wants the best for everybody. But it just happens that there are these devils, the world is a bad place and we are on the side of God. And what we need to do when the devil pops out its ugly head and it leaves us no choice, well, then we fight and then we strike hard, because that's the most humane thing to do. And we do it not for ourselves, we do it for humanity. And that narrative needs to be built. Now,
Yes.
currently, it's hard to build that because even if you are, CNN, New York Times blind to what's happening, you couldn't ignore the fact that, well, last Friday kind of was Israel that started the attack. They even publicly said so. They didn't even try to make an excuse. They just said they are the ones doing this. So you scratch your head. It's a little bit morally difficult at the moment. So what you need to do is you need a proper moral reason, and the best moral reason is, of course, being attacked and having a couple of Marines dying because you can be properly outraged. This is basically how the United States justified the entrance into most of its wars. It's even the First World War, they used the sinking of the Lusitania as the reason why the US had a moral obligation, which is really strange because the Lusitania was sunk in 1915, and in 1917 the US used that as a main reason. We need to prevent another Lusitania. It took them 1.5 years, but it shows how reluctant, really honestly reluctant, the US back then was. But they build up this narrative of under attack, and of course the entry into the Second World War, the most important event until this day, is like the Pearl Harbor, right? It was such a pivotal moment in order to change the psyche of the United States. And the official reason why the US then went all into Vietnam was the Gulf of Tonkin. We know that one was a lie, and
Yep.
and the WMDs of Iraq and so on. I mean, lie after lie, but it's the pattern, right? So what we need to recognize is that if that pattern repeats again now, then it will be because of we were attacked. And Ray McGovern actually said it's weird that we have this 50-year-old ship that is basically just a lame duck. I mean, if you wanted to blow up something, especially something that then can sink to the bottom of the ocean and nobody can go and ever research what it was, well, that one would do. So
Yep.
yeah, it might not happen, but the pattern would suggest that something like this is around the corner. Which is, of course, also a very disturbing thought, because it would mean that the US would deliberately consent to the attack on its own assets and killing of its own citizens. But that's something that we know that states, they do that. They make that decision in order to create what they need to go further into war. I mean, other states have done it before. Germany has done it. Japanese have done it. They attack their own infrastructure. And sometimes their own personnel dies, and then they use this as a reason to go to war. It's an old trick. It's not new.
Yep, not much can stop the military-industrial complex, regardless of where it is, right? Whether it's the United States or Germany or any other country. What's interesting now is that the regime change in Iran is now sort of coming up as one of a very obvious but previously ignored or not so much discussed goals. And today I was very surprised to see Pahlavi. He posted a video in which he called Iranians to take to the streets and overthrow the Iranian government. So it appears that all ducks are, being lined up for yet another regime change. And regime change will, of course, result in a civil war, and hundreds of thousands of people will likely become victims. And also, something that's also very important for Europe, and Europe should be thinking about, it might create another massive Muslim refugee crisis. It will create the crisis adding to an existing situation that's barely manageable by the EU, but also it's going to make it so much worse. So how do you view this goal to change regime in Iran?
I mean, this is obviously a goal. I mean, and that the son of the previous Shah has been ready. I mean, he has been ready in the United States. He has been on standby for at least the last 30 years. And I remember videos of his doing this kind of stuff regularly came up over the last couple of years. Actually, I remember the last one in 2019. There was also a crisis in the Strait of Hormuz when the U.S. almost fired at. I mean, when Iran downed one of the U.S. drones over its airspace, and then the U.S. went like, "Oh, we're gonna bomb you," and then didn't. And also in that crisis, in that interaction, the guy actually produced a video saying like, "Oh, we are here and we are waiting," and you can see like how he tries to get a really, background that looks very dignified, and then they usually try that, right? In when you do this regime change operations, then you will see the designated new puppet, um, showing up, even if it was a former ISIS leader, like in Syria, right? Suddenly, it's not in uniform and turban or whatnot. It's like it's in a suit with a tie, and then flags behind them, and the leader, dignified, and that kind of PR stunt is coming, and that's exactly what they're doing right now. The question is, will it work? So this could be the beginning of, a transition into exactly what you said, like regime change and then civil war. And that this would be Afghanistan type of civil war, right? Of an installed regime that then, with U.S. support, will be fighting against the resistance forces of the current regime that are going to be pushed out and back. And I can assure you they will use then Taliban tactics, and then the U.S. will call them terrorists and so on, right? Anyone who's not on your side is a terrorist. But this is, again, this could be a mega Afghanistan. And in Afghanistan, it took the US 20 years to replace the Taliban with the Taliban, right? And that could happen. But in the process, it will kill hundreds of thousands of people, and it will destroy the Iranian nation, and it will destroy the fabric, the social fabric there is. And again, if that happens, then that is the best case scenario for Israel. So but of course, this will come at the expense of thousands of American lives if they actually need to put boots on the ground. And if you want to put that regime in Tehran in power, you will actually probably need boots on the ground, because it's not enough to just bomb the country to smithereens, because the people there will oppose it. Now, the dream is still, of course, that then there will be an indigenous revolt, and you will have enough indigenous support of people who will take up arms and then bring back that Shah, and you will have a highly violent indigenous group that will do your bidding. That's the dream. But about this, I must say, I have a couple of Iranian friends, and they told me they dislike the regime. They do. They hate what they're doing. They hate the way they also treat women. They hate the way that they stifle dissent, that they hang people for just posting things that they don't like, and that's something I mean, this part of that government does. But these friends are telling me, look, I will I don't want my country to be bombed. I am in favor of the Revolutionary Guards firing back and actually trying to defend us. And we are kind of now happy that they do defend us and that they do try to defend the Iranian nation. And one more point, the Jews of Iran, the Jewish community, two community leaders came out, said they harshly condemn what Israel did, and they demand an end to the hostilities to the Iranian nation, of which they are part of. I mean, even the Jewish community of Iran is condemning all of this. So, and the Jewish community is actually very well integrated in Iran. It's not persecuted whatsoever. But this is just to say, the chances, it looks now, that what this attack did is that it galvanized actually Iran as a people and as a nation, and as a multi-ethnic nation. Because my friend, he's not even Persian, but from northern parts of Iran, but it is galvanizing this, and it's having the opposite effect. It doesn't split society; it puts it together. And if then you still want regime change again, then you need boots on the ground, and that would be a disaster on massive scale. I just can't imagine that boots on the ground in Iraq and in Afghanistan were already massive problems, and one kind of worked, the other one, escaped and is out. Massive loss of life also for the United States. But again, the military-industrial complex will win, and this is exactly what Israel still Israel is dreaming about and would want, and one of the only things that could probably also prevent larger political problems for Israel with its immediate neighbors. And let's not forget that while this is happening, we still have a genocide going on in Gaza, and still on a daily basis, 40, 50, 60 people get killed, shot and bombed on a daily basis in an open air death camp. It's a very, very sad moment.
Indeed. So in Iraq, to justify the invasion of Iraq, the government used this pretense of Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction. And of course, Hussein didn't have that. So right now, we're sort of reliving a very similar situation where narratives are being created to justify what appears to be a very possible tragedy. So, Pascal, is there anything that can be done right now at this point to prevent Iraq 2.0?
Yes, protests. The one thing that worked with the Vietnam War was the protests. Go out and protest, and don't believe these war narratives, and demand that this is ending. And I'm talking to not only the North Americans, I'm also talking to the Europeans. Mass protests that this must stop, because this is also one of the reasons I believe the Israelis did what they did now. I mean, we've seen mass protests for the first time in Europe against the genocide in Gaza, right? The narrative is shifting. The narrative is I mean, the Israelis are losing their dominance over this idea that they are the persecuted people, the most persecuted people on earth, and they need their state, and we all need to support this because otherwise another Holocaust is happening. I mean, this has protected Israel and has given them a lot of political leverage and protection in order to wreak havoc on everybody else around them, especially the Palestinians, but also on Syrians and others. And this is in the process of going away. And I think I interpret the attack at least partially motivated by this factor of trying to again establish narrative control. Now, what we can do is to just oppose that. No, we're not buying it, and we're publicly speaking against it, and we're demanding that our TV stations cover our point of view, and that we demand not to get involved militarily in Europe and North America. Just need to withdraw our support for the Israeli project with weapons, and optimally also economically put pressure on them, and then they will have to cease. They are a tiny nation, and the people of Israel need to be protected, safe and sound, and they have every right on earth to be, as every one of us. We all have human rights, every single one of us. So do the Israelis, so do the Palestinians, so do the Iranians, and the Israelis have the absolute perfect right to be safe and sound, but they do not have the right to try to achieve absolute hegemony in their region and kill everybody else who they choose they do not agree with. We need to change this approach of Israel. Needs to change, and all we need to do is withdraw support. So I would hope that can be achieved through protests. And again, like, the narrative that's building up is there in order to lull us into inaction, lull us into just accepting that this is now happening, this is now reality. You know, it's, well, the third Gulf War. I mean, we already had two. I mean, why not the third one, right? It's just the third Gulf War. Come on, there's so many wars. Let's just stay home and change the channel, right? Zap a little bit. People don't zap anymore, but let's scroll on, right? If that succeeds, if people scroll on, then we'll have the war. If people stop scrolling and actually say, like, no, I'm going to write to my representative. No, I'm going to support the what's the Medea Benjamin's organization, Pink,
Code Pink.
Code Pink. I will support other anti-war movements and donate to them, and then participate in these rallies or broadcast their views. Well, then you get the societal momentum to oppose and maybe change the course of war.
Pascal, thank you so much for this. This was a great conversation, and I do hope that you come back because I would love to get your thoughts on these events as they develop further.
Anytime, Lena, and I love your channel and I love the work you do, and I think it shows. I mean, the comments under your videos are always wonderful, so it shows that you have a wonderful audience as well, and you're fostering that. So happy to be online again with you.